Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's MISys Tips and Tricks video. We are continuing on our series on how to set up and run MRP. And this week we are actually ready to run our first schedule for our finished goods. As you can remember, we suggested to run MRP in 3 steps, and we have identified that as part of our MRP setup options, where we've chosen the 3-step run. And now we need to create that schedule for the first step, which is for the finished good, and then start running our MRP by first entering this data here into our schedule. As you can see, for planning horizon for finished good, we've selected 1 month. For shortage basis, for finished good, we selected minimum. And for the demand signals, we decided that the finished good would have shortage basis and sales orders from Sage. So let's go ahead and put these in. So once you're in MISys, you can navigate to planning menu, material requirements planning, master production schedules, where the grid shows you all the previously created MRP schedules. You can click new. The schedule number is something that is determined by you, so you can call it whatever you want. And then it's 6 characters long, so I usually tend to enter the description as the identifier here. I will put today's date, if I can remember what it is, and FG. So this is my finished good run that I'm running over 423. My planning horizon is shown here, start date and end date. Start date is automatically default to today's date, and end date is a default of 1 month, which works great for me because, as you can remember, I had selected 1 month for my planning horizon on my setup sheet. So I move to my shortage basis, and I know that I had decided to keep minimum. This means that I am keeping a certain level of finished goods on the floor, regardless of whether there are sales orders for it or not. That means there is either some stock being kept for make to stock items, as we've covered in the past weeks, or I just want to supplement my make to orders with some finished good stock available so I can decrease my lead time to my customers. So once I set my shortage basis to the selected value, then the next step is the initialization mode. I want to select all items. If you have alternate locations, you can select alternate locations here. What that will do is, if, for example, location 2 is an auxiliary warehouse for you, and it's really near to your location 1, you can identify location 2 as an alternate to location 1 in item masters, and then MRP, when the use alternate locations tick box is selected, will aggregate the inventory in both locations and compare the demand against those two. So just to give you an example, if there is a requirement of 100 for item A, because we need to build something in location 1, then when the alternate location box is selected or ticked, MISys is going to go look at your stock for item A in location 1, maybe you have 20, and then it's going to go look at location 2, maybe you have 50 for a total of 70. Now it knows that it needs to order only 30 to meet the 100 demand, instead of just looking at location 1 and saying, well, there's 20 only, I need to order 80. It knows that an item transfer with a move stock option will be able to help you bring that inventory from location 2 to location 1 because it's a nearby warehouse. And this way I can untick this location 2 here. If you have any alternate BOM components, you can opt to use them. And your holidays are directly populated from your production calendar. This is the standard, but you can play what if scenarios here by unticking Saturday, see how your production would work in terms of meeting demand if you were to work on Saturdays, and any other what if scenarios. I will leave it as the default for now. And then you move on to the connections with your accounting system. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm linking to QuickBooks, but it doesn't really matter whether you're using Sage, QuickBooks, or any other software that links to MISys. the important thing here is that I want to bring my sales inventory. If I am keeping my finished good inventory in my accounting system instead of MISys, I want to make sure these are considered in the planning. So I tick the sales inventory box, and then I select sales orders because, as you can remember, we said our demand signals are shortage basis, which we selected as a minimum because it was selected here as minimum for shortage basis for finished good, and also sales orders from Sage, or again, depending on what system you're using. We use Sage for the purposes of the uh, setup options, but my database is connected to QuickBooks. Same thing, we're bringing sales orders. QuickBook wants to know with location, location 1. If you actually want to bring sales orders from a specific date onward, you can use this option here and select a date, and it will ignore everything prior to that date. And once you have this set up, you save your schedule and then you initialize it. And it's connecting with QuickBooks, getting all the necessary information from QuickBooks. And we will know when this process is completed when the date initialized field gets filled in with today's date, and many of these fields will get grayed out. We will not be able to change them unless we purge that schedule. Depending on the size of your QuickBooks database and the data in it, it might take a little longer than what it has taken me. I can see that now the initialization has been completed. So now I have my schedule ready for my finished goods. The next step is that I will go to the options tab and deselect item types that are not finished goods, because as you remember, this is my first step and I'm running the schedule for finished goods. So I want to see only the shortages that are related to finished goods. And I can go to my summary tab and you'll see a very limited list of items. Obviously, if you have more finished goods than my test database has, you'll see them here. And those that have a shortage will be highlighted in red. By selecting that line, and I do recommend that you select lines by these small boxes in the left-hand side instead of going inside a field and trying to select it, which sometimes doesn't work as well as it should, and it thinks you're trying to inquire about an item. So you select it from the little box on the left-hand side and you go to the audit tab. What I am seeing here is different lines for different dates and different transactions. So the important thing here is to get familiar with some of this terminology so your auditing can become quite quick. The first line is always going to be initial stock. So it's today's date, 4/23. I have available 125 as initial stock. Next line is 4/29. There is a transfer to sales for 150 quantity, which would drop me to -25 because I only have 125 stock. And if I scroll a little bit more to the right, I can start getting more information about this transfer to sales order. It is related to a customer sales order that has come from QuickBooks. This is sales order 20. It's for customer A. It's for 4/29, and that is the information that I need. Next thing, same, 5/3, transfer to sales, 1,000 pieces. I'm dropping even further into negative. And another one, 3 days later, transfer to sales for another 100, dropping either more into the negative. And again, the same information here is available to you for you to see. Anytime you see this little icon that looks like a hand drill, it means to drill down onto that specific field, and it will allow you to find more information about opening that specific thing. So for example, here, finished good 1001, if I drill into this, it is going to open up the item master for me, and I can look at any information in the item master that I want. I can close it and come back to here. So the idea here is that at least until you get very familiar with how to run MRP, you go and audit your items one by one, the items that are showing shortage, so that you can understand why the shortage exists and what the system is seeing. Once you understand and confirm, yes, those are real shortages, and you feel comfortable with that, the next step is to either resolve shortages one item at a time. So you can select a line and resolve a shortage, or you can actually say resolve all shortages. When you resolve all shortages, all MISys is doing is scheduling all of the items and giving you a schedule. But because it does a transaction, which is the resolve all shortages transaction, it resets your options tab. So you need to come back to the options tab and deselect everything except final assemblies and come back here, and you'll notice now everything is white and you can't really even tell where there has been some shortage resolving. So you can go back to the options tab and select scheduled activity to see only those items that have now a scheduled activity. So I can go to finish good 1001, which was one of the items that we audited. And now you see a lot more lines than in the original audit. That's because for each date there was a shortage. MISys wants to resolve that shortage for that specific date. In the first step was the today's date with the 125 initial stock. That is good, but MISys is trying to schedule on the same day a finish assembly, and you'll see the activity type is scheduled as a shortage build. And this is because we set our shortage basis to minimum, and this item, finish good 1001, I will drill into it again to bring the item master up. And if I go to the stock tab for location 1, you'll notice that the minimum quantity is 400. I've selected minimum as my shortage basis, so MISys is saying at every point you should have 400 on the floor. So he's saying, MISys is saying, there is available 125. I need to build another 275 to get to 400. That's my shortage build. And then there is that transfer to sales activity we had seen earlier for a quantity of 150, which would drop me to 250. But because I need to get back to 400 again, now there is a finish assembly scheduled for the same day, 429, for the same amount as the sales order amount, 150. And the same logic continues. Because it brought me to 400 on today's date, and we'll talk a little bit about the implications of that, every other order that is created is equal to the size of the sales order itself. 150 sales order, 150 production, 1,000, 1,000, 100, and 100. And these are all builds scheduled, but MISys has not done anything yet. It's just suggesting that you schedule these production orders. If you feel comfortable with MISys suggestions after going through all of your items and looking at each one of them, then the next step is to create the MRP. You can save your schedule, and you want to apply the filter because we want to look at only finished goods. First thing is going to ask you whether you want to create purchase orders. We don't purchase finished goods, we manufacture them. So no, we don't want to create purchase orders. And the next one is, do we want to create production orders? And the answer is yes. I want to create production orders. And the process MRP build screen pops up. I maximize it for real estate. And you'll notice that there are two distinct sections to the screen. The top part will show you the requirements. These are our items. And the bottom screen shows you the detail for each of those selected items on top. I select finished good 1001, and these are the requirements. You remember it's trying to create 275 to add on to the 125 I currently have available to get to the 400 shortage basis level, and then the sales order quantities for each of the sales order dates. These are the completion dates that they need to be ready by this time, and then it's showing you when they need to start on the order date side. There are a few ways of going through and creating these production orders. One is build item. If I use the build item button, what it does is that it takes everything here and aggregates it into a single manufacturing order with a due date of the earliest due date. This can work if these dates are very close to each other and you don't really want to do one production order for the 23rd, another for 6 days later, and another one for 4 days later, and another one for 2 days later. You say build item, and it'll build one for this aggregated quantity due for 23. Another one is that if you want to build maybe this specific one, detail, then you can select the detail line and hit build detail, and it'll actually build just one production order for this line with a quantity of 275 due for 23. And then you can say, okay, for the rest three, I'm going to build item. So then you're aggregating these three. So you can slice and dice it in any way you want. Build all is a bit of a more blunt tool to use. What it does is that it creates a specific manufacturing order for each of the detail lines for all of the items here. So finished good 1001 has 4, finished good 2001 has 3, and SL50 has 1. So it'll create, if I hit build all, it'll create 8 separate manufacturing orders. Okay, so let's try build item for finished good 1001 rather. When I hit build item, a screen pops up, build requirement screen, and it's showing me whether there are any work orders or manufacturing orders that are currently in the system. And the purpose for that is if there is already an order, I might actually choose to dig into that order and increase its quantity to include what is being required here so that there isn't another manufacturing order or work order added into the system. I just increase the quantity and meet the demand. In this case, because there isn't any, I select new order and a create new build order screen pops up. You'll see most of the fields are grayed out here, order date, required date. A few options that I need to select is first, I need to decide whether I'm going to use work orders, manufacturing orders, or both. I will go with manufacturing orders here. And then order mode as required or multiples of reorder quantity. This is something we have selected also, order quantity for our finished good as multiples of reorder quantity. So I will go ahead and select multiples of reorder quantity. And what this does is, again, this is a field in the item master that has been decided. And I am telling the system, I have a minimum order quantity. If it is anything less than this, I don't want to build it for that little. Let's say that the reorder quantity for this item is 2000. When the requirement comes as 1525, and you select multiples of reorder quantity, it's going to build 2000. It says, I don't want to build anything less than 2000. And if the requirement was 3500, then it would multiply the reorder quantity, 2000, by an integer, first by 1, and then by 2, and then by 3, until it meets or exceeds the requirement. In this case, I select this and it becomes 1600. I am pretty sure that my minimum order quantity for finished good one is 800. My reorder quantity is 800. So it tried 800. It didn't come to required quantity. So it multiplied it by 2. And now it met and exceeded the 1525. So I want to build this. It already knows what is the next manufacturing order number in the system. All I have to do is hit create. There is an option of not releasing them at this point, but please note that if you don't release a manufacturing order, MISys will not see that as a demand for the other items like the sub-assemblies or intermediaries or for purchase items. So a manufacturing order or work order has to be in released status for it to create a signal in the system. And I hit create, and it's telling me that it has a shorter lead time. Why? Because the required date is today, and it's going to take more than just today to build it. And this is something that needs to be understood. It's because my first due date here was 4/23 on my process MRP build screen due to my shortage basis of minimum. My shortage basis is seen as MISys as a stock that you already should have had on your floor. And because you're missing quantities, complete it now. Today is the order that MISys is giving. So it creates an unreasonable schedule because you cannot actually go into the past and start something physically. So I acknowledge this error, and a manufacturing order 1126 has been created for a quantity of 1600. I can drill into this manufacturing order from here and see it with a completion date of 4/23. You notice that the start date is 4/1. It requires 22 days to complete this order. So I'm gonna have to make some changes in my schedule. So I can close this and close this. That was an example of how to use build item. You notice on the top section, finish good 1001 has disappeared. Now I select the next one. It has 3 steps. Instead, I'm just going to hit build all here just to show you a different screen that pops up. It's different than the build item or build details screen, which are exactly the same as each other. But when you hit build all, because it's going to use a more blunt tool, it's going to have less options here in some cases and more in some cases. You can actually group the orders by work orders if you're using work orders by item number or BOM revision number or start date or whichever way you want. Note that when you're using orders created by the system, it will use the current version BOM for building that item. If you don't want to use the current version BOM, if you want to use a different version BOM, you might want to either change your current revision by going to the bills of material and selecting the BOM you want to use as the current revision, or after creating the manufacturing orders, going and deleting that one and creating a manual manufacturing order for the revision that you want to use. So again, I select manufacturing orders in my build mode and multiples of reorder quantity in my order mode. It knows automatically the number. Again, the don't release option is here. If you have any custom fields in your BOM that you want to match, you can select these and then you can create orders. You get a similar warning because you have the same issue with the 423, which is today's date, requiring 350 pieces of SG FG 2001 having to be created. And we have now 2 orders, one for MO 1127 and one for MO 1128. So how did that happen? How did it happen that FG 2001 had 3 lines and I actually hit build all and it only created one manufacturing order, even though I had said that build all was going to create a specific manufacturing order for each line, and we expected to get 3 lines or 3 manufacturing orders for FG 2001. Well, because I used multiples of reorder quantity, and the multiple of reorder quantity for FG 2001 was 800, that one order was able to cover all of the requirement in all of these 3 lines. So it was able to meet it at one work order or one manufacturing order. The same is true for SL50. It built 500 because of the multiple of reorder quantity option, even though my SL50, now I cannot click on that screen, but had, I think, oh, actually it had, I think I had a 1 line. So that was not an issue for that one. So I can close this build all results, and you notice that the process MRP build screen clears because we have now created a manufacturing order for all the finished good requirements. I can close this and close my MRP schedule and head over to production orders. And here is a Gantt chart for me to see. I can zoom in and out into this Gantt chart. By zooming out, I'm able to see all 3 orders that I have created. Notice that they're all now with today's due date. That's not going to be very realistic. So what I want to do is move the timeline a little bit to the right. And now I want to say, okay, I can't start this in the past, but I can start it today or maybe tomorrow, depending, let's say tomorrow. And then this one, well, I can run these at the same time. So this, but I cannot run SL50 at the same time as FG 1001. So I'm gonna have to wait until that finishes and I'll schedule it here. Once I make these changes based on my capacity, and you will know that what your capacity is. And if you're actually using work centers on your bills of material, then you can go into a more detailed schedule normalization or fine tuning through the shop operations option here and do more minute by minute planning of all the work centers to make sure there are no conflicts in your schedule. Once you do that, you save your production schedule and now your finished goods are scheduled. This is the end of the first step. Next week, we are going to go into how to create the schedule, the second step for our sub-assemblies or intermediaries. I hope this helps you use MISys more effectively, and hope to see you next week.